God morgen. Velkommen til North Shore Unitarian Kirke. Jeg så Lindsay Hindle. Good morning, welcome to North Shore Unitarian Church. My name is Lindsay Hindle. I'm a board member and lay chaplain. And last night I attended the annual Camp Luther Lutefisk dinner. And I still feel a little bit, jazzed up from that Scandinavian experience, of which is part of my heritage. And what I love about this community is that we all come here with different backgrounds and different traditions, and we're allowed to share that with each other in an openness that, we may not find in other places. So no matter who you are, who you love, what you celebrate, what your traditions are, how you make your living, you are welcome here. Welcome.
I'd like to say good morning again on this beautiful sunny day. My name is Ariel, and I'm the Youth Program and Connections Coordinator, and I really want to extend a special welcome to any visitors or newcomers that we have this morning. If you'd like to get more connected here to our community, I'd invite you to sign in with your contact information on the iPad that's in the foyer. And there are friendly volunteers wearing greeter buttons who would be very happy to answer any questions that you might have about this community or this living tradition we share. And I would invite everybody after the service to come downstairs for coffee or tea and more conversation. I have one announcement today, which is a great big thank you to all of the volunteers who prepared and served and cleaned for all of the people who attended the holiday dinner last night. It was quite a party, so I'm told.
We have hope that this will work. How many of you like to have hope for things? It's that time of the year. Things are getting darker. Hope can be harder to get. And then, of course, it's going to turn around. How many of you have got hope for hopeless things? Things that maybe, I think we all have a selection of them. One of my hopes over the years is that my best friend Matthew here would move from Edmonton to Vancouver. We were really good friends in Toronto in high school, and we're kind of like twins in a lot of ways. For better and for worse, and can finish sentences, play music very easily. And then, a couple of years ago, he moved to Bowen Island with Becky, his wife. But it's been hard to sort of get together. There's very, very many problems getting to Bowen Island and back, especially late at night. But this lovely church and playing music together here has brought us into, finally, this fall, weekly sessions of practicing our music together. And it's just like the best thing, a long-held hope come true. And I hope the church can give you some of those long-held hopes and the hopeless hopes as well. That's why I come to church.
I've got a little story to share. If anyone likes to come forward for a story, I'd love to have you join me up here. This is a story about the holiday that's happening this week. Do you know what holiday is happening this week? Sure, on. You have to press the on button on these things. Yeah. Okay, whoa, there I am. So the holiday that's happening this week? Yeah. Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the holiday that's happening this week. It's the holiday that's even older than Christmas, if you can believe that. And it's a holiday that celebrates the story of the Maccabees. So I wanted to tell you the story of the Maccabees. But to hear about the story of the Maccabees, first you need to know about Hanukkah, that it's about celebrating candles, right? That's the main ritual of Hanukkah, is lighting these candles and watching them burn down. And they're candles that represent hope and freedom, and they come from a time when there was a guy, some people, they think that the light of hope or freedom just should belong only to them, and that they should have it for everybody. Have you heard that people sometimes think that? Do people get this idea? Yeah, sometimes. Do you know anybody who thinks like that? Don't answer that. So This is there was a story. This is a story about a guy named Antiochus. He was a ruler who was a king, and he was one of those people who thought kind of the way I see the light should be the way everybody sees the light. And so Antiochus he was the ruler of the Syrian Empire, the Assyrian Empire that had spread across the land wide and far. And he decided that everyone in the Assyrian Empire, everyone who had come in the lands that he had, should worship the Greek gods just like him. He just loved the Greek gods. He loved Zeus, the god of lightning. He loved Hera, the god of hair. He loved, this is a retelling, I should say, from my favorite storyteller, Joel Ben Izzy. He loved Apollo, who's the god of space missions, and Nike, the god of footwear. So he loved those Greek gods, and he said everybody should love the Greek gods as much as I love the Greek gods. So he put up big statues in every town for the people to worship and to love just as much as he did. And that, people would mostly do that because he would, told them that he would kill them if they didn't. And usually when someone says that, but it got to the point where there was this one town where an old man lived, old man Maccabee, who came across the statue one day, this new statue in the middle of the town. He said, "Oi, what is this? This statue? It's ugly. Why did they add it to the middle of town?" And the guard who was standing there, the Syrian soldier, said, "Well, that's Zeus. That's God, and you must worship him now." And he said, "This is God? No, this is a statue. I don't worship statues. This is not God." And the soldier said, "No, really, this is God now, and you need to worship it. And I have to worship this statue." And he pushed the statue, and it fell over, and the head popped off. And the soldier said, "You can't do that. This is God." And he said, "I can. I just did. I can set it up. I'll do it again." That was fun. So the trouble is, old man Maccabee went home that day, and he gathered his children around. He had 10 children, 5 daughters and 5 sons, and he said to them, "Well, I have to tell you about something I did today." And you can imagine what the children did. "Oh, Dad, what did you do? Did you do something that was going to embarrass us today?" "Well," suffice to say, the Assyrian army came as Antiochus had promised that it would. It came, and the Maccabees, old man Maccabee and his 10 children, they gathered all their people around them, and they fought. They had a long war with the Assyrians, and it was hard because the Assyrians, one of the big, they had a real funded army with suits of armor and elephants. That was one of the big things they had. They would charge the elephants into the Maccabee soldiers, and the Maccabees had nothing that they could do. One of the Maccabees came up with a strategy for dealing with the elephants. When the elephant's charging in, he would get right under the elephant, and the only vulnerable place on an elephant is the belly button. So if you get right under and you tickle the belly button, the legs would just flay right out, and the elephant would go splat down onto the ground. Now, there's only one problem with that strategy. And that's why you eat potato pancakes on Hanukkah. Well, this story is getting off the rails. So, in the end, there's a guy named Judah the Maccabee. He's everybody's favorite Maccabee because of his middle name, right? Judah the Maccabee. He saves the day, and eventually, when almost no hope was left, the Maccabees had been crushed over and over again. Almost no hope was left, but the key word there is almost, because they had enough hope to try one more time to take their temple back. And they succeeded. They fought off the armies that time. Somehow, the small beat the big. And they took back their temple. And when they got there, they found that the Assyrians had destroyed it. They'd been using it as their party central headquarters, and they had ransacked everything. They'd drunk everything they could. They'd poured pig's blood out all over the floors. They had smashed all of the bottles of the holy oil that was used to light the holy lamp. They had a holy lamp, a lot like when we have our chalice that we light every week. They had a holy lamp, except they kept it lit all the time. It was supposed to never go out. And the adults, when they got to the temple, and it was such a mess, and they just fought this war and everything, they were just exhausted, and they just said, you know what, let's go to bed. But you won't believe what happened next. The children actually went around cleaning up the whole temple. They just started cleaning it up. They took care of what needed to be taken care of, and they had like a treasure hunt to find oil to make the lamp burn. They had this treasure hunt searching far and wide. They couldn't find any oil that hadn't been broken, except finally one little girl, one 5-year-old little girl, she found the last little bottle of oil. And she brought it to Judah the Maccabee in the morning, and she said, here it is, some oil to light the lamp. I think it'll last for as long as we need to make more oil. And Judah said, oh, there's no way. And she said, do you believe in miracles or what? And they lit that oil, and the flame burst up, and then it went down, and it went so small. I'll show you how small it is. If you take your fingers, your forefingers and your thumbs, and you push them together, so you make a tiny little diamond that you can see through. Take all those. That's how small that flame was, but it lasted. And it lasted and lasted until they could make more oil. And so every year since then, the descendants of those folks, the Jewish people around the world, have lit candles for those 8 nights while the oil burned, waiting for more oil to be made. Thankful that even when things get really, really bad, there's still a light that burns. I hope you enjoy whatever it is you do in your classes today. Will you rise and sing our children out?
Take a moment to settle in. Rest comfortably in your seat. Feel your feet on the floor, your breath moving in and out. I invite you to a time of prayer or meditation, followed by shared silence. From poet Nancy Wood. Hold on to what is good, even if it is a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe, even if it is a tree which stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it is a long way from here. Hold on to life, even when it is easier to let go. Hold on to my hand, even when I have gone away from you. In this community of care, we hold and witness one another through the seasons of our lives. In this time of stillness, may our sanctuary hold whatever is on your heart today. We celebrate with Sonia Macra, giving a welcome to 2 new great-grandchildren who arrived in the last 2 weeks. Merry Christmas to Ezra and Hannah. For that which has been named and for that which we hold in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, we light this candle of hope and love for our community. As we light a second candle of witness, we recall the people and places near and far whose stories weigh on our minds and hearts. We hold with care the whole of Metro Vancouver, working hard to house the homeless people here who need shelter. We hold in our heart 69 years ago, the Declaration of Human Rights was formed, December 10th, 1948, something many Unitarians worked hard for. Peace be upon each and all.
Emily Dickinson was born in 1830, died in 1886, both in Amherst, Massachusetts. And in that span of time, she lived through a hotbed of religious upheaval. Some of her closest mentors and associates were Unitarians, not least among them, there's that Thich Nhat Hanh mindfulness bell. Some of her closest mentors, associates were Unitarians, not least among them Ralph Waldo Emerson, figurehead of the Transcendentalist Revolution. And the Transcendentalists, they were uprooting long-held religious bedrocks. And in that happening, there was a strong Calvinist reaction to the Transcendentalists. When Emily was a teenager, a religious revival swept through Amherst. Many of her peers became evangelicals. Her poetry and her life faced into death and depression and despair. Her work wrestling with these questions of religiosity and how to deal with the most fundamental elements of life. Her work, hardly any of which was published while she lived, was groundbreaking in terms of kind of the postmodern existential struggle. Famously reclusive, she ended up saying about church, "Some keep the Sabbath going to church, I keep it staying home." And her poetry became an essential voice of that transcendentalist era. She describes that Sabbath service of hers at home with the song of the bobolink bird replacing the choir, the growing orchard replacing the church dome. Through her direct experience of nature, of the world of beauty, she concludes, God preaches, a noted clergyman, and the sermon is never long. So instead of getting to heaven at last, I'm going all along. She often referred to herself as a little bird, a wren. So I want to leave her there just perched alongside us for now. A couple weeks ago, I met with our Soul Matters facilitators. I meet with this group at the end of each month to talk about the upcoming monthly theme, support them in facilitating the Soul Matters small groups that will discuss that theme in the month to come. So a couple weeks ago, we were talking about this month's theme of hope, and several of us shared the same reaction, which was sort of a distaste for the word, a kind of initial kind of, it's not a word that means a lot to me. I wanted to share that because I was wondering if anyone else has that reaction about hope. It's not something that immediately excites you. Some puzzled faces, some nods. This is good. There's something I think that can feel weak or anemic about the idea of hope. Maria Popova, who's the accomplished writer behind the blog Brain Pickings, she writes this about hope. Hope without critical thinking. Hope without critical thinking is naivete. I think it's this sense of hope as naivete, hope without critical thinking, that tastes a bit too saccharine for our refined Unitarian tastes. It's this kind of hope that feels more like a wish, hope for a fairy tale ending that doesn't take seriously the challenge and trauma of the world. It's Pollyanna hope. Man, I think my mom must have made us watch that movie, the movie version of Pollyanna with Haley Mills, probably annually at least, growing up. My mom is a bit of a Pollyanna. And talk about saccharine, that Pollyanna hope, it's repulsively sweet. And you familiar enough with the story? You know the Glad game? The glad game. It's the game that the orphan Pollyanna learned from her late father. The game started on Christmas one year. Pollyanna opens the barrel from her missionaries, hoping to get a doll. Instead, finds only crutches. In what I can only imagine was the desperate improvisation of parenthood, her father makes up the glad game. Find something to be glad about in any situation, no matter how bleak. That Christmas, Pollyanna was glad about the crutches because she didn't have to use them. Saccharine sweet, and yet the glad game turns the town on its head in that story. While Maria Popova dismisses hope without critical thinking as naivete, she also claims the necessity of hope because she says critical thinking without hope is cynicism. And cynicism is a dangerous thing indeed. So into this dance of critical thinking and hope, of Pollyanna and cynicism and naivete, Andrew Solomon, who's written extensively about depression, asserts this: accuracy of perception is not an evolutionary priority. Accuracy of perception is not an evolutionary priority. Normal human thought and perception is marked not by accuracy, but by positive, self-enhancing illusions about the self, the world, and the future. He cites the work of Dr. Shelley Taylor, the psychology professor at the University of California in Los Angeles. In her book, Positive Illusions, she explains that the mildly depressed, actually appear to have a more accurate view of themselves, the world, and the future than do other people. The mildly depressed lack the positive illusions that can promote mental health and resiliency. Illusions that may buffer against setbacks. And this is where we find ourselves in a very special Unitarian bind. One of the hallmarks of our tradition through history is a devotion to truth. We name it in our principles the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We have spiritual ancestors who were martyred over their devotion to it. We fought bitter battles over our interpretations of it. We're ultimately cast from the Christian fold, probably for the best, over our devotion to including reason in its pursuit. We like our cold, hard facts. Our reason, our unornamented truth. We like that to be part of the mix. In fact, I have pagan friends who this time of year sing a special song to make fun of us. I'm going to sing it for you, I think. God rest ye Unitarians, let nothing you dismay. Remember there's no evidence there was a Christmas day when Christ was born. We just don't know, no matter what they say. Oh, tidings of reason and fact, glad tidings of reason and fact. I haven't learned the second verse. There was no star of Bethlehem, there was no angel's song, there could have been no wise men, for the trip would take too long. The stories in the Bible are historically wrong. Oh, tidings of reason and fact, glad tidings of reason and fact. So maybe we take it a little too far. The bind is simply what Andrew Solomon noted. In our quest for accuracy, we run the risk of a maladaptive loss of positive illusion. In our quest for accuracy, for truth, we run the risk of a maladaptive loss of positive illusion. Critical thinking without hope is cynicism. Hope without critical thinking is naivete. So this hope that's not uncoupled from critical thinking, hope that has grit, that's steeped in the boiling waters of realism, where does that hope come from? And to find it, I think we have to start with its absence. in that place called hopelessness or despair? Because it's a funny thing that while hope can seem weak and anemic, no one would ever level a charge like that at its evil twin, despair. Those who've known hopelessness and despair in themselves or those they love know its power to suck the light from a sunny day, to hollow all our achievement and success, to cast the shadow of the worst of the past and present across the whole of the future to come. And as an aside, I want to ask if you have a story of getting through your own hopelessness or despair, of persevering when things are hard. I'd like to invite you to jot it down and share it with me, if you're willing. In a couple months, we're going to explore perseverance as our theme, and I'd like to make a collage of voices from some of your stories. So start thinking about that, if you will. But a few weeks ago, I had an opportunity to spend an incredible weekend with the poet David Whyte. And I mention that because maybe a little bit of explanation and warning for what may be excessive use of his work for a little while here. His book, Consolations, the solace, nourishment, and underlying meaning of everyday words. In it, he wrestled me away from my habitual understanding of despair. Despair, he writes, despair takes us in when we have nowhere else to go. When we feel the heart cannot break anymore, when our world or our loved ones disappear, when we feel we cannot be loved or do not deserve to be loved, when our God disappoints, or when our body is carrying profound pain in a way that does not seem to go away. Despair takes us in when we have nowhere else to go. Despair, he says, is a necessary and seasonal state of repair, a temporary healing absence, an internal physiological and psychological winter when our previous forms of participation in the world take a rest. It is a loss of horizon, the place we go when we do not want to be found in the same way anymore. We give up hope when certain particular wishes are no longer able to come true, and despair is the time in which we both endure and heal, even when we have not yet found the new form of hope. And lastly, he says, despair turns to depression. Despair turns to depression when we try to make it stay beyond its appointed season and start to shape our identity around its frozen disappointments. Despair is kept alive by freezing our sense of time and rhythms of time. When we no longer feel imprisoned by time, and when the season is allowed to turn, despair cannot survive. When I've felt worst hopelessness and despair, I've felt like a prisoner to time, unable to summon any spark of hope within. Like Pollyanna when she's finally flattened on the hospital bed, unable to feel her legs, unable to feel glad about anything. The paradox of despair is that while we are in it, it feels as though we are disconnected and separate from everything else, isolated and alone in our hopelessness. But facing our own hopelessness, living through despair, in fact, connects us more deeply to every other person who's ever lived and struggled like us. Connects us to that bigger story of original struggle. Because when Pollyanna lays in that bed and can't summon anything to be glad about herself, she is flooded by a river of visitors, people who once rolled their eyes at her glad game, but who have been profoundly impacted by her special brand of hope. When Pollyanna can't play the glad game for herself, the game isn't over. So I was diving into my despair one winter, hardly able to leave the house, excruciating to be left alone for more than moments. I couldn't see a future brighter than my bleak present. And it was December. And one evening, it was the first night of Hanukkah, because these things happen, however we're feeling. And since I was a kid, I'd loved that ritual of Hanukkah, lighting the special candles, singing the special song, watching as the candles burn and the sun set, waiting for the last spark to go out, waiting with the light just that small. And that December, I wasn't thinking about how much I loved Hanukkah or how nice it would be to watch candles. But it was the first night of Hanukkah, and lighting the menorah is what you do, so I just did it, going through the motions. And there was no instantaneous, miraculous recovery. The spirit of Judah the Maccabee did not descend upon me and cure my depression. But I watched the candles burn that night. And as I did, there was a glimmer of hope. Childhood memories of the holiday came to mind. There had been other times. And I had some recollection of feeling differently than I felt then. And somehow, those little flickering flames, not particularly powerful or strong, but real and alive, were what I needed to imagine the possibility of other years to come. It was not a miraculous recovery. I woke up the next morning. It did not feel much more like getting out of bed than I had the day before. My depression took several months still to lift. But there was something miraculous about that moment, something of a miracle in the simple ritual of lighting and watching candles, connecting me to millions of people across the world and over thousands of years. Hope, which I could not summon for myself, flickered along anyway. Hope. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea. Yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. Emily Dickinson. The blessing of hope is this: you are not responsible for keeping it alive. That thing with feathers never asks a crumb of you. Hope, true, simple, honest hope. It may not be strong and burly, may not be a blazing beacon bright enough to burn away fear and keep despair at bay. It cannot eradicate poverty, end war, or save the child. But perched on the soul, singing its tune with words in the chillest land, never stopping at all. burning in the flame that illuminates even the longest night, spoken in whispers among those waiting for a sign, waiting for a baby, waiting for a savior, squeaking in the voice of a child playing the glad game, holy in the rasping breath of a deathbed. Hand still held out with warmth, offering children and grandchildren blessing. Even as life comes to an end, hope lives its own life and is not daunted by anything it has seen yet. When we no longer feel imprisoned by time and when the season is allowed to turn, despair cannot survive. A few more words from David White to close. This is Sweet Darkness. When your eyes are tired, when your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. Time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. The dark will be your womb tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Blessed be.